I'm going to ask a really simple question. Why are we all here at 8 a.m. on a really cold morning? Look, I'm going to go through this and say it very, very simply. What do you think is the biggest solution to climate change? Is it clean coal? A lot of people have said this, and they go, is clean coal a big solution? And certainly if you look at Treasury modelling beyond 2030, it is. Well, that depends if we get this stuff to work, and it's certainly not going to be anywhere near commercial for the next 15 years. So are we just going to sit around and do nothing for the next 15 years, maybe buy some permits internationally? Do you think that's a good idea? I personally don't. What about nuclear? Well, I think nuclear actually looks pretty exciting, and you look at it and you go, wow, it looks like something from the Jetsons. And to be honest, I think we probably will be driving flying cars by the time we get the stuff up in Australia. So if there was no community objection to nuclear power, we would probably get a first plant up in about 10 years. So that's great, and that's if there was no community objection. I think that might be a little bit slower than that. Renewable energy, this is actually a really big contender for one of the big solutions to climate change. It is going to be a big part of the solution, but there are limits to how much renewable energy we can get on the grid. It's quite expensive, and until you get non-intermittent sources, so that's geothermal and other sources like that, it's actually going to take quite a while before we can start getting a serious proportion of our energy from renewable energy. So we definitely need to invest in it. We need to invest in research and development. But again, this is a long-term solution. How about a toaster? Well, I'm not suggesting that this is the solution to climate change, but what this is representing is there are literally hundreds and thousands of ways that we use energy every single day, and this is actually the biggest solution to climate change at the moment. There are hundreds of different ways of using energy, and that means that there's hundreds of different ways of saving energy. And don't take my word for it. Let's go to International Energy Agency. What they're saying is something pretty shocking for a really conservative agency. What they're saying is that if you look at nuclear, by 2030, so that's a long time away, that's 20 years, they're saying that nuclear is going to be about 9% of our carbon cuts to deliver really deep cuts in Australia, in the world, sorry. Carbon capture and storage is, if we get it up and running, and they think we will, is about 14%. Renewables is much bigger. Renewables is 23%. But energy efficiency is 54% of our abatement from the energy sector. 54%. So that's more than all the other forms of energy combined. And by 2020, it's an even bigger, it's an even more startling story. It's 65%. Now, that's the global picture, and a lot of people say, well, that's global. Well, I don't know if any of you know the Australian Bureau of Agriculture and Research Economics. If you think IEA are boring, you really should have dinner with these guys sometime. They're really tedious, and they say it's again, Australia's biggest solution of climate change, 55% of abatement to 2050. So what we're talking about is basically the biggest source of abatement, and it's currently the one that we have been ignoring in a very, very big way. Australia has had some very good programs on energy efficiency. I'm not going to deny that. I actually think globally we've actually got one of the best programs on appliances. So I'm not going to deny the fact that we've got some very good things there. However, this is really not a complete picture at the moment at all. So not only is it the biggest source of abatement, it's also the cheapest. This is a McKinsey curve. This is basically a curve that says from the left to the right we have the cheapest solutions to climate change, and on the right we have the most expensive ones, and then the width of the bar is how much abatement you can get from it. And what you can see is on the left of the curve, it's all energy efficiency. So all the things that save us money are energy efficiency. And it's actually astonishing if you look at that curve and you go, well, we've got about a third of the abatement is new measures. So about half of abatement is going to come to energy efficiency. We're doing a few things, so some of that's in train. But if we do a whole bunch of other things, about a third of our abatement in Australia could come from energy efficiency, and that will actually save us money. It's about $100 saving per ton of carbon abatement. So this is the great thing, is you don't even have to believe in climate change. How can I put it? Even Andrew Bolt has got to assume that energy efficiency is a good idea. So the other thing that's really important is not only does it save us money, and the estimate from ClimateWorks, which is an independent organization, they say that it's $5 billion a year saving if we really achieved our energy efficiency potential. The other thing is it's about saving us price on electricity. So it's actually lowering the cost of electricity. We're about to spend $40 billion in Australia to upgrade the poles and wires, basically. So that's $40 billion over 5 years. In New South Wales, it's going to push up electricity prices by around 42% in 3 years. So it's a really big increase in electricity prices. And about a third of that is just to cope with our spiralling demand. Now, we have a lot of opportunities to reduce that demand, which actually offsets not only poles and wires, but also generation. And so what we find from the studies in California is every dollar invested in energy efficiency actually saves us $2 on infrastructure like poles and wires and generation. So it's a bit of a political win-win. So if you think this isn't going to be an issue in the election, I think you're probably thinking very differently to most of the politicians at the moment. So I'm going to talk about what government's doing at the moment, because they are very, very interested in energy efficiency, but I'm going to talk a bit later about what they should be doing as the next steps. So in buildings, there's 4 big things that are happening at the moment. The first thing is mandatory disclosure of energy efficiency. This is legislation that's just passed, and it was actually a really good example of bipartisanship. This was proposed by Howard in 2004. Then Labour's done a lot of work to get this up, and finally we got it over the line with some good amendments from the opposition. It's a really key policy. What it's going to mean is when you buy or sell a building, when you basically lease or sell a building, you're going to need to disclose the energy efficiency rating for that building. And as Romilly said, that means if you're having to stick a sign on the outside of your building saying, I'm a 2-star building, it's really going to impact on the price that you can lease or sell that building at. So what we're going to see over time is this is going to basically free up the power of tenants to demand more efficient buildings. It's really, there's a statement, I suppose, that's been bandied around a lot over the last decade, which is that green buildings get you a higher rent. And a lot of people have said, well, that's not true, but that's changing very fast. And one of the reasons that wasn't true for a while is that really you were the only green office in town. So yes, you got a premium rent, but you're also a fantastic new building. So of course you're going to get a premium rent anyway. This is changing very fast, because when you actually think about moving from a situation where, when I moved into a green building earlier this year, I was struggling to find somewhere with space, but that's changing very fast. And so as tenants are given a real choice, suddenly this is going to have a real price impact. Secondly, building owners still pay a lot of the prices for electricity, and higher energy prices are coming in. So it's 42% in New South Wales, and that's just electricity network stuff. That's nothing to do with climate change. That's just more poles and wires to make sure we don't have any more brownouts. That's going to really impact on people's bottom lines. Third, governments are going to be looking at transitional incentives. So it's about saying, I'll talk about this a bit later, but what we're going to see very likely is that governments will put some money in incentives for building companies to upgrade their efficiency of their stock, but it's not going to be around for long, so people really need to get a wriggle on if they want to get their hands on some of this money. Finally, they're going to mandate action. And I'm going to sort of talk about that, I suppose, fairly quickly. The governments have already mandated in Victoria, and it's actually one of the nation-leading programs, that all public sector buildings are going to have to improve their energy efficiency. So in Victoria now, all buildings have to improve their energy efficiency over the next 8 years. And the reason is very simple. They think it's going to save the government $1 billion. So that's a fairly substantial saving. And frankly, Department of Treasury and Finance are basically, as they put it to me, they're pretty sick of wasting money on departments that are just throwing money down the drain for no good reason. So governments are mandating it in the public sector, and we're hoping that all the other states are going to follow suit on this. Queensland's already doing very well, and they have been doing very well for quite a number of years now. But what we're actually seeing around the rest of the world is the governments are saying, well, if we're really not going to see this sector start to move, we're going to start to actually tighten the thumb screws on this. In fact, New York at the moment is looking at a program of saying, if you own a large building and it is inefficient, you're going to have to upgrade its efficiency. You don't have a choice about it. They're trying to get that through at the moment. Now, I don't think this is going to happen in Australia tomorrow, but I would have to say that in 2015, if we've had very little progress on retrofitting our existing buildings, I don't think governments are going to be going, oh, well, more incentives. I think they're going to be hitting the point of saying, there's a whole number of buildings out there that have already acted, they've already retrofitted. If you're a laggard, well, tough luck. It's time to step up and take some action. So I think in the next 5 years, this is going to be sort of increasingly talked about. So business drivers, saving energy and money, you know, as a campaign for Bill Clinton's election said, it's the economy is stupid. You know, you own a building, you want to have good tenants, you want to get a good rent, you want to lower your overheads. Energy efficiency, it's pretty damn obvious. And with incentives and regulations coming on, it's going to be even more obvious. So, really basic thing is how to take action. Well, this is really going to vary on a case-by-case basis, but one thing is absolutely certain. You need to have experts involved, whether that's in-house experts or external experts. You need to get people who really understand energy efficiency. It is a specialized area. A lot of people think that energy efficiency is something that you should just get, you know, your standard building manager who's never had any training to get involved in. yes, they need to have some basic understanding, but the fact is it takes 2 years to train a competent engineer who understands buildings in a basic sense to become a real expert in energy efficiency upgrades. So the first thing you really need to do is understand your business case, and I would suggest that you get an expert involved in this, somebody who understands buildings very, very well and understand what kind of an upgrade do we need to go into. As Romilly pointed out, and I think she is a really good point, there are very different types of upgrade you might want to do. If you're selling your building in 2 years or you're about to do something major in 2 years, maybe you just want to do a bit of a tweak, a bit of a tune. If you're thinking you want to really improve the efficiency of your building for a longer period, but it's generally a good building, you might want to do a retrofit. On the other hand, if you say this building is an absolute dog, I need to replace it and I need to do a whole bunch of things, aesthetically it's ugly, it's a really uncomfortable space, you might want to do something far more substantial. So you need to work out very fast what your goals are. That's the first thing to do, and get some expertise in that is a very good point. The second thing is to engage some experts. Now, if you're lucky and you're a company like Investor, you have some in-house experts who are very good, but the vast majority of companies out there can't afford to have an in-house energy efficient expert at all the time. So it's about really going out there, going to the market, finding somebody reputable to help you through the process. The lucky thing is you can actually find good companies that are able to identify the opportunities for energy efficiency and implement them. And if you don't have in-house skills, that's really where you want to be going. It's about saying you don't need to be an expert in energy efficiency, you just need to know how to engage somebody who is an expert. And that actually takes a bit of skill. You need to understand the market, you need to understand how people, how the companies work and how they're reputable and how they can deliver good services. As I said, ideally you do want to hire one company to do the job because then they're able to offer you some sort of assurance over the energy savings, whether that's guaranteed in a contract or it's just a standard offer of we're going to install these things and they will function. It's in the same way that I bought myself a new laptop and I'm very excited. It's absolutely tiny. I can hold it on one finger. It's actually in danger of being stolen by ants. But I got it through my IT manager because, or an IT company that I hired through, because then I know if there's a problem with it, I can actually just go back to them and say, there's a problem with this. I don't care if it's the software. I don't care if it's the network. I don't care if it's the computer. You fix it. So it's a really nice thing about hiring one person to do the full work. Now, I'm going to talk about a few examples here. There's a bit of data that was put out by a company a couple of years ago. I'm not going to mention who. It said it takes 15 years to pay back an energy efficiency retrofit. That's far from true, and if it was true, most of us would be out of business. I'm going to be really quite honest about this. And if you think companies like Siemens, Honeywell, and Philips are going to be out there saying, and Origin, going to be saying, well, you know what, we feel like being out of business, so we're going to get involved in the energy efficiency sector, I think you've probably got another thing coming. It's about the different types of retrofit. There was a study that was looking at complete retrofits of whole buildings, and then they tried to justify the cost based on the energy payback. Well, you're not going to build a building on an energy efficiency payback. So, a few basic examples. The first thing is you can literally just retune the building. The largest opportunities are in HVAC, generally, and it's astounding how many buildings are just badly tuned. Just tweaking the HVAC system, getting a real expert who understands it, can often deliver about 32% of the greenhouse savings in the building, and that's got a payback period of only 2.7 years. However, I think that just doing that alone is generally not the best idea. What you really want to do is bundle in a whole package of measures. So that's lighting, that's HVAC, and that's behavior as well. So it's actually how you manage the building. A good example of an investor, very, very good. They've just recently done a building. They got a 51% energy saving with a return on investment of 50%. My God, if my shares were performing at that level, I'll be pretty happy. So I'll probably be moving. It's kind of this hard thing. I'd like to invest in Investor, but then it looks really dodgy if I do because I'm involved in the sector. This isn't just small stuff. It's not just big stuff. Here's an example of the Empire State Building in New York. They did a whole range of things, just sensible things like tenant lighting, day lighting. They upgraded the chiller plant. They put in variable air volume conditioning, which is basically saying you only use as much air as you need. And they got in a tenant energy management plan. So it's not just behavior, it's not just building, it's both of those together. 38% energy saving on a really old building. It's quite astonishing. Annual savings of 4.1 million a year. That's a payback period of 3.1 years. It's an astonishing project. But these are all projects that pay back very well. You can actually go to that next stage. And I'm just going to end with a slide from Zencore Building, which is really a world-class green building and it's actually based in Melbourne, so you can go and visit this. This is really a research and development project. It's absolutely astounding building. involves lighting controls, redesigning the entire envelope of the building. So all that stuff on the front is new, all the internals are new. It's got passive ventilation combined with gas air conditioning. It's got on-site microgeneration. It's absolutely astounding building. 65% energy savings. Return on investment, it's a demonstration project. And it was actually built by Peter Zentel, who I think is a real visionary in the sector, who basically wanted to build a world-class green building to show that it could be done. And he's done it, and it's an absolutely astounding piece of work. And Peter unfortunately passed away last week, so it's a really sad story to see somebody who's really led the sector, and his vision, I think, is starting to come to reality. So, what do we need to do? I'm going to end on 5 brief statements and then move straight on to some more practicalities. There are 5 things that we really need to do to make the Zencourt building normal, because it's R&D. R&D brings down costs over time. Right now, any building in Melbourne can really easily get a 30% energy saving, but we can really be pushing towards 65%. 5 things we need to do. The barriers are information. Not everyone is an expert in energy efficiency, and we need to build skills across a whole range of areas. That's property sector, that's architects, that's energy efficiency specialists, that's even people like lawyers who sign up contracts. So there's a whole range of work that we need to do around that. Second thing is cooperation. We need to address the barriers between landlords and tenants. They are real, they do exist. They're not insurmountable, but they are a barrier. Third thing is you need to pay people for services. Research and development is a service. If you want people to do it, you have to pay them to do it. At the moment, we don't. Fourth thing, you need to pay when there's damage. So that's both damages to the electricity network. If I have an air conditioner in Queensland, for every kilowatt, that adds $3,000 to the electricity network, and currently I'm not paying for that. That's kind of messed up. We need to fix that. But the obvious one that's addition to that is the carbon price. The final thing is regulations. Currently, the electricity regulations are a real barrier to cogeneration and a whole range of other forms of energy efficiency. Where you've got those existing problems, you need to address them. So, to address information, cooperation, paying people for services, paying for damage and regulations, we've developed a fairly clear platform, which is an overarching goal to cut energy demand in Australia by 20%, a national efficiency scheme, getting electricity distributors to invest in energy efficiency when it's cheaper than poles and wires. It's not brain surgery. Buildings, you need to ensure that there's access to capital. That's a fairly complex issue I'm happy to talk about a bit later. Performance disclosure, which is making sure that tenants disclose their ratings as well as building owners. Supporting innovation and building the capacity of people like lawyers, property owners, and energy efficiency specialists. So it's a fairly ambitious plan, but it's essential. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some pretty astonishing announcements, I think, in the next couple of weeks. Well, that's what I'm hoping. Thanks very much.